that this project is about ethnic cleansing.
Itamar Ben-Gvir, we have this. I mean, I'm not sure if you think this is worthwhile to play now, Sam, but like,
yeah, let's play this.
yeah, this is, I can read the translation for the podcast audience, but this is Itamar Ben-Gvir, the Minister of National Security, an extremist in like the most, anodyne definition of his ideology, speaking on Monday about ethnic cleansing openly. The solution of encouraging the residents of Gaza to emigrate is one that we must advance. It's the right, just, moral, and humane solution. I call on the Prime Minister and his new Foreign Minister, who I congratulate on his appointment. Now is the time to coordinate an emigration project. A project to encourage residents of Gaza to emigrate to the countries of the world. Let's be clear, we have partners around the world whose help we can use. There are people around the world with whom we can advance this idea. Encouraging their emigration will allow us to bring home the residents of the communities near the Gaza border and the residents of the Gush Katif settlements. That's it. So that's just a very sanitized way to say that the Israeli government can and will engage with its partners in the world, and that seems to be the United States.
Blinken's flying around with our planes to try to facilitate this.
Yeah, in ethnically cleansing Gaza. So the point is just they either die by bombs, they'll starve to death, or you leave. And other nations I think he's probably referring to are like another top recipient of military aid being Egypt. But the problem for Israel is that the level of fury in the Arab world, I mean, like even Saudi Arabia, which was hoping to normalize relations with Israel, and they were working towards that under the Trump administration because it's in their best financial interest to do so, like they're having to be pulling back the reins because the amount of anger over Israel's the accused crimes of genocide now in, the International Criminal Court by South Africa is like rightly leaving Israel and the United States completely on an island.
We should say that it's not just Ben-Gvir, who's one of the, like an avowed fascist, essentially, in the Israeli government. But Smotrich, who's the Minister of Finance, has said, we're not going to give any money to even Palestinians in the West Bank because they don't want it to get to Gaza. That guy was at one point a settler in Gaza, has called for resettling Gaza with Israelis. He has also said we need to encourage immigration. I mean, do you remember when Mitt Romney said this kind of thing in this country? Just alluded to something like that, and there was a total outrage. And it was not backed up with the demolition of essentially, 80% of the housing of people and the near starvation of 50% of the people and the food deprivation for 98% of the people and the internal refugee status within Gaza of people who are already Gazan refugees to something like 90%. And this was reported a couple of days ago in the Israeli press. Prime Minister responded to member of Knesset Danny Danon, who stated that at the Likud faction meeting that, quote, we must establish a team that will take care of anyone who wants to leave Gaza for a third country. Is Israel doing this out of the goodness of their heart? Well, there's only going to be a couple of families, or this is the plan. We make it so that people want to leave.
It's the only humanitarian solution.
And we'll get to this case in front of in the UN court that's being brought by South Africa. But here is a clip from the New York Times. Just to give you a sense, and we should say that if you follow this stuff, whether it was about the command center under the Al-Shifa hospital, whether it was about the idea of who was bombing citizens, Gazans going down to the south, whether it was the use of white phosphorus, all these things, you have Palestinians making these claims, huge skepticism. 5 weeks go by, and then, an American newspaper or someone, some third party investigates it, and it's like, it turns out, yeah, that was right. Here is a New York Times investigatory video that shows what has been going on, not just in Gaza generally, but specifically. And how many times do we hear this? No other army in the world gives warning to people they're about to bomb like Israel does. No other army in the history of the world protects civilians like Israel does. And we should note there is nothing that compares to the rate of death of women, children, civilians. Nothing that we have, at least in the past, 50 years.
2/3 of the dead so far are women and children. We say that not to say the men's lives are less valuable, but because Israel is claiming all men essentially could be Hamas. That's why they're stripping them naked and humiliating them in public.
And there's no data points that don't highlight the fact that this is a civilian slaughter. But here is more specifics. You'll recall, and it has been touted by Israeli officials over and over and over again, and anyone trying to defend this, that the Israeli government goes to such great lengths to protect civilians. This is important for you to see if you have bought into that.
This is an area in Gaza where for weeks civilians fled to find safety. These are 2,000-pound bombs, one of the most destructive munitions in Western military arsenals. When a 2,000-pound bomb detonates, it unleashes a blast wave and metal fragments thousands of feet in every direction. Sometimes, 2,000-pound bombs leave giant craters in the earth, like this strike in South Gaza in November. Munitions experts say 2,000-pound bombs are almost never used by the U.S. military anymore in densely populated areas. Israel says it must destroy Hamas above and below ground to prevent terrorist attacks.
Gaza,
like
the most
7,
densely populated area in the world.
and claims it's taking extraordinary measures to protect civilians. But a Times investigation using aerial imagery and artificial intelligence found visual evidence suggesting Israel used these munitions in the area it designated safe for civilians at least 200 times. Our analysis indicates 2,000-pound bombs were dropped on a routine basis in South Gaza during the first 6 weeks of the war. And it suggests that even for those who followed every Israeli evacuation order and advisory, there was still no safety to be found in a war zone that's more dangerous for civilians than any in recent history.
There it is from the New York Times. So you can send that to your.
Yeah, good liberals can start to not stop both sidesing this. So it's a complete lie. Also, like, and the fact that they go so over the top to say no other country would take such great efforts. I mean, that's ridiculous on its face. But also, no other country in the world is in this situation. Like, the unique situation of Israel is so important for people to understand. This is not a conflict. It is a mass slaughter of an entrapped civilian population that has been entrapped there in Gaza, and we're not even talking about the West Bank at this point, for years and years, because Israel controls their borders, their water, their electricity, their way of life, everything. It is an open-air prison by every definition possible. So this isn't a war. And I can't, we've got to stop with the framing.
I mean,
because, it aids exactly that kind of propaganda that no other country would alert the people in the prison that we control that we're about to bomb them first. But wait, no other country really has this exact kind of situation, especially with the United States, the most powerful country in the world that has the biggest military budget 4 times over from the next country at their back. The uniqueness of the situation also underscores how barbaric Israel is.
And even if you want to do comparisons, like Russia's committing war crimes in Ukraine, killing civilians in their invasion at a slower pace, much slower than Israel is. So
yeah.
Here is a clip of the journalist Gideon Levy on Sky News. That's the British cable stuff. This is from Saturday.
He's written great stuff in Haaretz.
yeah.
And it gives it sets up this other clip that we have as well. But the Israeli population polls somewhere in the 80s as to their desire to basically flatten Gaza, and they don't have a huge amount of love for Benjamin Netanyahu, but they're on the same page in terms of what they want to have happen in Gaza. Here is Levy saying that that number is probably sustained in part because they really don't have an idea of what is going on in Gaza at this point. And it's sort of difficult for us to wrap, for me, to wrap my head around that. But when you contemplate how half a population in this country can be in a media bubble that allows them to have a completely different narrative about some of the most basic facts, like this Civil War, for instance, it becomes clear because, as Levy says here, that like there is no room for dissent in Israeli society at this moment.
Is an overall support in Israel for continuing the war. The scenes that you are exposed in the UK and elsewhere are not shown here in Israel, systematically, not by the media, voluntarily, not by the media, but most of the Israelis are not exposed to what you are exposed. And therefore, it's much easier to support this war without having any moral doubts about the outcomes. And what you can see in international networks or in networks like yours is so horrifying that you really ask yourself for how long and how long will this support go on? Because the support, no critic about this war, no question marks, no resistance, no opposition, nothing. Israel supports this war from wall to wall. Yes, sure, the figures are published, but figures are only figures. It's, it's all about the framing. You can give figures, they might shock you, but Israel is really concentrated. It's its own sacrifice, its own mourning, its own care about the hostages, and all this is very understandable and human. But as long as you don't see the scenes, you cannot understand what is Israel doing to Gaza right now. And therefore, there is this apathy. And more than this, that even to pay some kind of empathy with Gaza, with the pain of Gaza, solidarity with Gaza is almost criminal now in Israel, and you might be taken to court and to justice.
And to be clear, that's not hyperbole. You have, throughout this 2 months or 3 months it's been since October 7th, we've seen like Israeli teachers who have been called in and questioned about stuff they put on social media. We've seen this happen with journalists. I mean, all throughout Israeli society, you need to toe the line. And lastly, before we go to break, let's play this clip. I don't know if people are aware of this, but Israel is a conscript nation. You turn 18, you go to the army, unless you have some type of religious exemption or some other activity. But everybody goes to the army in the way that, like, you graduate junior high, you go to high school here.
Yeah. It plays a huge part in how militarized and radicalized the society is.
And this has always been the case. And it is also, I think, very much romanticized in Israeli society. Israeli society, to the extent that there's still a secular communitarian vibe in Israel. Much of the sort of like the strands of socialism that were there in the early days and expressed in kibbutzim life has been sort of the last vestige, the last greatest vestige, I guess, to be more specific, is in the military. And so and I think like I saw some response to this, to the extent that I followed it over the course of last week, that what this guy was doing, it's easy to sort of like overpraise him. But I think it's also easy for us in the United States to not fully understand the implications of an 18-year-old publicly saying, I'm not going into the army because of these reasons. It is in a society that is 80% supportive of what is going on. And aside from that, the support for the military in Israel and going into this is an act of bravery. Yeah. Oh, yes. But I'm saying the expectations are, I don't think we have anything equivalent, frankly, in this country to to going into the military in the way that they do.
I mean, and the kid is 18. We're about to play a hero. And like I can't think of a time in your life when social pressure is more pronounced from your peers than when you're 18 years old. So it's the societal pressure and then like the social pressure and the romanticization of it. And the fact that all of his friends are probably getting conscripted as well. That's what just is so moving to me about this act of
and his
defiance.
Bubble, like he appeared on Hassan's Twitch stream, I believe, with like Noah Colwyn, and like that when we had Ilan Pappy on, it talked about how like we need the messages to come from outside of Israel, because for the messages within are just, let's continue the bombing campaign. Maybe there's a problem with Netanyahu, and this kid has gotten those messages and is talking, converse with people. So being supportive of people like this kid standing up like this, I think is really important.
Check this out. Yeah, I think at that point he's heading off to jail. 30 days in jail.
Tal Mitnick is his name.
More people should follow him.
All right, folks. We're going to take a break, head into the first